Came across a really interesting piece out of Politico magazine from Mary Anna Mancuso, who worked within the Forward Party, Andrew Yang's Forward Party, his third party project, and is now coming out and affirming a lot of the criticisms and bolstering a lot of the criticisms that have been levied at the Forward Party really since its inception by many people, including myself. And this piece is titled, I saw the hollowness, I should say, inside Andrew Yang's new third party. And we'll walk through some of what Mary Anna Mancuso outlined. She worked as the press secretary for the Forward Party and points out that the criticism from people, the concern that this is a very vague kind of political showmanship oriented effort, meaningless effort that really isn't doing what it purports to do and really isn't serving to put forward actual solutions to the problems it purports to care about, is absolutely a correct criticism. And that's what a former employee now is saying after working inside of the organization. If you're not familiar, Andrew Yang ran as a Democrat within the 2020 presidential primary and then ran for mayor of New York City, and then started this Forward Party with the slogan something like not left, not right, but forward. And even though it's admirable to want to do the things that the Forward Party says it wants to do, like address polarization and division and minimize those things and break down the current hold over the political system of the two major parties, the way that the Forward Party has gone about implementing that is not as admirable. And one of the big red flags that has been called out, including by myself, has been the lack of any policy positions, clear policy stances that the Forward Party is willing to roll out, which is never a good sign. So we'll talk more about just third parties and how that would be, what would be a better way to go about it, I guess, and all of that after looking at what Mary Anna Mancuso has to say. When the Forward Party, as she writes, launched in 2022, it defined itself as a movement designed to break through a dysfunctional two-party system that catered to the ideological fringes. To avoid the kind of rigidity and top-down decision-making that marked the two major parties, the new movement announced there would be no traditional party platform. It was viewed as a vestige of the past, a one-size-fits-all approach that stifled democracy. State forward parties would determine their own priorities. Individual candidates would then develop their own policies around those priorities. But the Forward Party is making a dangerous miscalculation. It is betting that what a party opposes is more important than what it stands for. Motivated by a tech industry ethos that considers disruption for disruption's sake a virtue, Forward is following a path blazed by some of the startup culture's biggest debacles, Theranos and WeWork. I know because I saw it from the inside as the national press secretary, and then it dives into her story getting involved with the organization. And that was a really powerful line and way to put it that sums up how I felt, which is it's perfectly fine and well to go around saying that you're against Republicans and Democrats because of the countless issues with both parties, obviously the Republican being way worse, way worse, not even comparable. But it's fair to say the division that that two-party structure has caused or contributes to is something that you want to address, sure. But then to only run off of what you're against, only run off of the fact that you're against division and polarization and not outline what you're for, then leaves a lot to be known. She continues, we had been promised our reform efforts would continue. Instead, I found an organization convinced it could maintain and grow its disparate coalition by not taking any positions at all. Its very existence was premised on the idea that in the future, political parties will succeed by not having a philosophy of government, a shared vision, or even a platform to unite behind. That's not what I signed up for. So just trying to win people over by pointing, as I always say, by pointing at a problem. Pointing at problems is really easy. It's putting forward solutions that is the hard part. And asking for people's loyalty and buy-in to your project without a clear vision for how that would actually govern, how you would actually be a governing party, is not something I find serious or interesting. It often seemed that Forward expected to create change through the sheer force of Yang's personality and a healthy dose of hope. The lack of core beliefs and ideas, it turned out, was precisely its selling point. If everyone continued to believe in the end result, the details wouldn't matter. And it talks about how this reminded her of some failed companies as of recently. And then it talks about the CNN segment that we covered where Jim Acosta interviewed Andrew Yang and asked, is this just an attempt to kind of keep you relevant and your name in the news so that you can run for something larger like president once again in the future? And Yang didn't really clearly rule that out, which makes it feel like maybe that's kind of what you're doing, and that's why you're not trying to clearly draw some lines in the sand as to what you stand for. This all sounds great in the press, but in practice, that's not what happened. When the text chapters, and then to give some specifics, and actually let me jump back. According to the messaging guidelines we received in response to questions regarding Forward's official stance on hot button issues, we were to explain that candidates and party members should have the freedom to represent their communities and advance their views freely. In other words, how gun control is handled in California may not be the same way Florida deals with gun control. Forward party candidates should be able to handle issues as best suits their state. And then talks about how that sounds good in theory, but in practice, it doesn't as effectively. And then just to kind of round this out, government affects real people's lives, and the founders built an elegant yet fragile system of checks and balances to prevent social disruption from consuming it. As technologists often discover, breaking industries and companies apart is easy. It's building value from the disruption that is difficult. A party that stands on a platform nothing is reflective of an emerging culture that prizes showmanship over substance and the misguided belief that if you convince enough people to believe in something, it is true. And so she then starts making the case that while, yes, there's issues with the two-party structure, maybe it's not as bad as people think, which I don't even think is the argument that needs to be made here. Instead, I think it's more about, yes, it's admirable to want something different, want more options, want a third party. All those things are admirable. But it is the way you go about it. And I do think the authenticity of your ambition. And if this is just showmanship, if it's just a chance for you to be seen as the guy with the new above it all ideas or gal with the new above it all ideas, instead of an actual set of long-term solutions that you hope to fight for and implement and see them through. And I worded that way, and I think that way because that is how third parties will become more viable. A long-term strategy that is very structural, just randomly, as No Labels is doing, or as we've seen some other third parties and definitely the Forward parties doing, trying to emerge as a national candidate party, putting forward a national candidate for the presidency, for example, to me shows a level of unseriousness, because there are very structural things that need to be done before third parties are going to be viable whatsoever. And a big one is changing the way our elections are run toward a ranked choice voting model where people can kind of have multiple options they put on a ballot, and then your vote's not as wasted as it could be with our current first past the post voting structure, and then starting more at a local level, getting some victories in, making clear what your party stands for. That, I think, is how you grow something. It's lobbying and trying to push through, honestly, through the current Democratic Party, because that's where these ideas are more accepted. Structural changes to our elections, again, a big one being ranked choice voting instead of first past the post voting. And then while you're doing that, trying to get some relevance in smaller local state spaces and conversations, and then go from there. But whenever it's just this election cycle in the next 2 years, we're going to fundamentally change the reality of our political process and destroy the GOP and Democratic Party, to me seems like a publicity stunt and not a serious attempt to change the structure of our political process that right now is centered around two-party system. So push for electoral reforms, push for ranked choice voting, work on a local level, and go from the ground up. That would be my advice if it's something you're passionate about. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to be a part of what makes this show possible, plus get access to the full video version of the show hours before all the clips are able to be uploaded to the YouTube channel, plus get the bonus show on the weekends, you can do so by going to lukebeasleyshow.com/membership. That's lukebeasleyshow.com/membership, and there's a link in the description.